What would you do if the passenger you picked up wasn't running from a man, but from something older than memory itself? Einar Johnson's hands were trembling on the steering wheel, though he'd been driving these streets for 30 years. Reykjavík at midnight was usually quiet. Just the hush of snow, the dim glow of street lamps bending in the wind. But that night, he felt hunted before he even saw her. She flagged him down with a single wave. A girl, no more than 19, her sweater torn, threads dangling like veins unraveling. She didn't climb into the taxi so much as collapse into it. Her breath fogged the glass. Her voice was a whisper that felt like confession. If I don't wear new clothes tonight, it will eat me alive. Einar's chest tightened. He should have laughed it off, dismissed it as drunken nonsense. But something in her eyes froze him in place. Eyes that looked not frightened, but already resigned. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Inside, the cab felt colder than the street. The radio crackled, cutting through silence. His dispatcher's voice should have been a comfort, but what came through wasn't Olafur at all. It was his daughter's voice. Papa, where's my Christmas dress? Einar slammed the brakes, the cab fishtailing across the icy road, because Bjorg was supposed to be asleep, safe at home. And that's when he realized, this wasn't a passenger anymore. This was a trigger. The ride had already begun. And it would not end with him alive. What if the voice calling you for help was the one person you couldn't afford to lose? Einar's knuckles turned white on the wheel. His daughter's voice, fragile, pleading, still echoed in the cab. Papa, where's my Christmas dress? The words were soft, but they tore through him like claws. He wanted to scream into the radio, to demand Olafur answer him, but the speaker hissed again. The dispatcher's voice finally came through. Steady, annoyed, dismissive. Einar, you're imagining things. There's nothing on this frequency but me. But he knew what he'd heard. His daughter, her voice, and then the girl in the back seat leaned forward. He smelled frost on her skin, as though she'd been carved out of ice. It doesn't ask twice, she whispered. The cat always starts with children. Einar spun around to face her, but the world outside the windshield shifted. Where there should have been familiar streets, there was nothing but white. Endless snowfields, no landmarks, no signs. The taxi engine groaned, struggling, as if it were pushing against a storm that only existed for him. And then, another voice came through the static. Not Olafur, not his daughter. It was his wife, dead for 6 years. Einar, why didn't you save me? The steering wheel slipped in his hands, his breath breaking. Because this wasn't just a fare anymore. This was punishment. This was every failure he'd buried, every guilt he thought he'd outrun, coming back in a single ride. And the girl in the back seat? She just stared at him with hollow eyes and whispered one last thing. It already knows your name. What if the thing that wanted you didn't hunt your body, but the people you failed to protect? The taxi jolted as if an earthquake had struck, tires bouncing on ice. A sound followed, low, dragging like talons carving through bone. The roof buckled. Einar's breath caught in his throat. From the rearview mirror, he didn't see a face. He saw fabric, coats, scarves, children's sweaters, pressed against the glass as though someone had plastered them there, wet and heavy. Threads unraveled, drifting like smoke into the cab. The girl leaned forward, her eyes empty. Do you hear it? The stitching breaking? Every life it's taken is sewn into its skin. The radio hissed again, but it wasn't static this time. It was laughter, small, fragile. His daughter's laughter, but twisted, slowed, like a record dragged against the needle. Papa, the sleeves don't fit. They're too small now. Einar's chest tightened. His hands shook so violently the wheel swerved. That voice was real. Too real. Something slammed the trunk, hard enough to pop the latch. He glanced back. The lid rose on its own. Inside wasn't luggage. It was clothing. Piles of it. Torn coats. Shredded boots. Tiny mittens soaked in red ice. And right on top, folded neatly, was a dress he recognized. Not because he'd bought it, but because he'd never been able to. Bjorg's Christmas dress. Perfect. Knew. Waiting. His stomach turned. This wasn't chance. This wasn't fate. This was a debt being collected. What if the one person begging you for safety was the very reason you were being hunted? Einar's eyes locked on the dress in the trunk. Jorg's dress. Perfect. Crisp. Folded as if waiting for her small hands. His stomach twisted. How could something that didn't exist yet be here? The girl in the back seat finally spoke again. Her voice steady now, no longer the trembling whisper of fear. You're not the first, you know. Every year it takes what's owed. A coat, a sweater, or a child. Einar gripped the wheel tighter, his voice breaking. Why me? Why my family? Her silence was worse than words. Her pale fingers traced the window, and when she turned to him, her eyes glistened. Because my family gave you to it. The world dropped out from under him. His chest hollowed. She told him the truth in fragments, each word like a knife. That her father worked alongside him once, that his family had been marked years ago, and that the debt wasn't random. When it came for me, my father offered another name. Yours. He gave it yours. The purr above the cab grew louder, like thunder contained in fur and teeth. The air thickened with frost. Einar shook his head violently, disbelief choking him. But then he remembered. The accident at the mill. The missing coat that winter. The colleague who never looked him in the eye again. He'd thought it was guilt. Now he knew it was survival. The betrayal wasn't happening now. It had happened years ago in silence, in shadows. And tonight was just the collection. The girl leaned close, her voice a dagger wrapped in sorrow. You weren't chosen, Einar. You were traded. What would you do if the person who betrayed you begged you to protect them from the very thing they fed you to? Einar's veins burned with rage. The girl's words still echoed. You weren't chosen. You were traded. Every memory, every debt, every year of struggle, it wasn't bad luck. It was betrayal. His grip tightened on the wheel until his knuckles split and bled. But before he could speak, the taxi roof caved with a thunderous crack. Metal bent inward. A claw, thick as an iron bar, punched through, dangling threads of fur soaked in frost. The girl shrieked, ducking low. Her hands clawed at Einar's arm, desperate. Drive, please. Don't let it take me. Her voice, so terrified, so human, ripped at his chest. But her confession still lingered like poison. Her family had bought their survival with his bloodline. And now she wanted him to save her. The radio howled again. Not static. Not voices. But purring. Deep. Slow. A sound so heavy it shook his bones. The mirror splintered, glass scattering into his lap. And for the first time, he saw it fully. The Yule Cat's face pressed against the windshield. Amber eyes glowing, mouth curled in a grin too wide for nature. And between its teeth hung scraps of children's clothing. Tiny sweaters, torn scarves, mittens unraveling one thread at a time. Einar's heart hammered. His daughter's laughter rang faintly from the speakers, twisted into a scream. Papa, it's here. The girl sobbed, pulling at him. Please, I didn't want this. I didn't know it would come for you. And that's when the final betrayal hit him. She had known. The guilt in her trembling eyes told him everything. He slammed the car into park, ripping the door open. Snow sliced across his face as he stepped into the storm. His voice was hoarse, furious, trembling, but steady. If you want me, then face me. The Yule Cat's purr broke into a growl so low it cracked the ice beneath his boots. And in that moment, with the monster's shadow towering over him, Einar wasn't running anymore. He was daring it to take him, daring it to leave his daughter untouched. But the girl's scream cut through the blizzard. A final betrayal. If it doesn't take you, it will take her. Have you ever wondered what betrayal feels like when it comes not from an enemy, but from the blood in your own veins? Orin stood in the ash-soaked ruins of the sanctuary, his hands trembling as he reached for his son's arm. But Malric pulled away, eyes glowing with that unnatural fire, the same fire that had once destroyed their world. It hit Orin like a blade in the chest. The monster he had sworn to fight was not outside the walls. It had grown inside his bloodline. Father, Malric whispered, voice shaking. The darkness speaks to me, calls me stronger than you ever were. You taught me to fight it, but what if the fight is the lie? What if the monster is what we were always meant to be? Betrayal. It wasn't a stranger holding the knife. It was his own child twisting it. Orin's vision blurred. He remembered the nights he held Malric as a boy, promising him safety, swearing the world would never swallow him whole. Now, he realized safety was the one thing he could never give, because the darkness had already claimed his son. Tears burned down his scarred face as he whispered, "Then I will do what no father should ever have to do." He raised his blade, knowing that in this moment, to save the world, he would have to sacrifice his own bloodline. But Malric didn't flinch. He only smiled, a broken, haunted smile. "Kill me, father, and the darkness will live inside you instead." And Orin's heart shattered, because for the first time he didn't know if he was facing his son, or if he was facing the monster itself. "Would you bleed for a future you'll never live to see?" The hall was drenched in shadows, the walls trembling with the cries of the unseen. Every betrayal had led him here, every broken promise, every friend turned enemy. And now, it was no longer about saving himself. It was about breaking the curse, even if it meant erasing his own bloodline. His hands shook as he lifted the blade. Not out of fear, but out of love, for a child who would never be born, for generations who would never carry his name. He had been chosen not to rule, but to end. Across from him, the betrayer smiled, their eyes cold as steel. "Do it. Spill your own blood. Let the monster finally sleep." The air thickened with despair as the blade pierced his palm, the first drop of blood hitting the stone floor like thunder. With every cut, the curse tightened around him, trying to crush him before the sacrifice was complete. But he did not scream. He did not beg. He bled in silence, like a father tucking in a child who would never wake. And then, the silence broke. The ground quaked. The walls shattered. The monster's roar rose one last time before collapsing into nothingness. The curse was broken. The price was paid. But there was no victory. Only ashes. Only silence. Only the memory of a man who chose love over legacy. And now, when you stand in the ruins, you'll feel it. That heaviness in the air. That chill in your bones. Because sometimes the greatest horror is not being forgotten, but being remembered only as a sacrifice. Subscribe to the Veil of Secret, because some stories bleed forever.